Marcus Thompson was born in a small, forgotten town called Millbrook. It was the kind of place where dreams went to die. The factories had closed years ago. The streets were empty. Most people worked at the local grocery store or drove trucks for a living. Nobody talked about art. Nobody talked about music. Nobody talked about becoming something bigger than themselves. His father, Robert Thompson, worked at a car repair shop. He came home every night with grease on his hands and tiredness in his eyes. His mother, Sandra, cleaned houses for rich families in the next town over. They were good people, honest people, but they had stopped believing in dreams a long time ago. Marcus was different from the other kids in Millbrook. While they played football in the empty lots and talked about getting jobs at the warehouse, he would sit by himself. He would close his eyes and listen to sounds that nobody else seemed to hear. The wind through the trees became music to him. The rain on the roof was like a soft drum. Even the birds singing in the morning felt like a beautiful song that the world was playing just for him. When Marcus was 7 years old, something happened that changed his life forever. His grandmother passed away, and his family had to go to her old house to sort through her belongings. It was a dusty place, filled with memories and forgotten things. While his parents packed boxes and talked about what to sell, Marcus wandered through the rooms alone. That was when he found it. In the corner of the living room, covered with a white sheet that had turned yellow with age, stood an old piano. Marcus had never seen a real piano before. He had only seen them on television, played by people in fancy clothes at concerts he did not understand. But something pulled him toward it. Something deep inside his chest told him to walk closer. He pulled the sheet away slowly. Dust flew into the air, dancing in the sunlight that came through the dirty window. The piano was old and worn. Some of the white keys had turned the color of old teeth. But to Marcus, it was the most beautiful thing he had ever seen. He sat down on the small bench. His feet could barely touch the floor. He did not know what he was doing. He had never had a single lesson in his life. But his fingers reached out and touched the keys. The sound that came out was strange and wonderful all at once. It was like the piano had been waiting for someone to wake it up after all those years of silence. For the next 2 hours, Marcus did not move. He pressed different keys. He listened to the sounds they made. He tried to copy the melodies he had heard in his head for so long. His parents found him there, still playing, when the sun began to set. His father laughed. Not a mean laugh, but the kind of laugh that comes from surprise. "What are you doing, son?" he asked. Marcus looked up with bright eyes and said the words that would shape his entire future. "I want to play the piano. Dad, I want to be a musician." The silence that followed was heavy. His mother and father looked at each other. There was something sad in their eyes, something that Marcus was too young to understand back then. It was the look of people who had once had dreams of their own, dreams that had been crushed by the weight of real life. "That is a nice thought," his mother said gently, kneeling down to his level. "But piano lessons cost money, sweetheart. And we do not have that kind of money. Besides, musicians do not come from places like Millbrook. That is for rich kids in big cities, kids who have been playing since they were in diapers." Marcus did not argue. He was only 7, but he made a promise to himself that night. He would learn to play the piano. Somehow, some way. He would prove that dreams could come true, even in a place like Millbrook. They brought the old piano home. His father said it was because Marcus seemed to like it, and it was better than throwing it away. But secretly, Marcus believed his father understood something. Maybe his father saw a spark in his eyes that had long ago died in his own. The piano sat in the corner of their small living room. It was out of tune. Some keys did not work at all. But to Marcus, it was his treasure. Every day after school, while other kids were outside playing, he would sit at that piano and practice. He had no teacher. He had no books. He had nothing but his ears and his determination. He would listen to songs on the old radio and try to copy them. At first, it sounded terrible, like a cat walking across the keys. his father would joke. But Marcus did not give up. Not once. Not ever. Days turned into weeks. Weeks turned into months. Slowly, something began to change. The random sounds started to form patterns. The patterns started to become melodies. And the melodies started to sound like real music. By the time Marcus was 10 years old, he could play simple songs without making many mistakes. By 12, he could play complex pieces that made his mother stop washing dishes and listen. By 14, he was creating his own music. Songs that had never existed before. Songs that came from somewhere deep inside his soul. But the world outside his home did not care about his progress. The kids at school had made up their minds about Marcus a long time ago. He was the weird kid who stayed inside. The strange boy who played an old broken piano instead of playing sports like a normal person. They called him names. They pushed him in the hallways. They told him he was wasting his time on a stupid dream. Marcus learned to keep his head down. He learned to ignore the laughter. He learned to let the cruel words wash over him like water off a duck's back. Because every night, he would go home to his piano. And when his fingers touched those keys, the world disappeared. The pain went away. The laughter faded. There was only the music. His parents watched him with a mixture of pride and worry. They were proud of how hard he worked. But they worried about his future. What would happen when he grew up? There were no jobs for pianists in Millbrook. There were no opportunities. They loved their son, but they feared that he was setting himself up for heartbreak. Maybe you should think about learning a trade, his father said one evening at dinner. Something practical. Something that will put food on the table. Marcus looked at his plate. He did not answer, because he knew that no matter what anyone said, he could never give up on music. It was not just something he did. It was who he was. And somewhere deep inside, he believed that one day, he would prove them all wrong. High school was the hardest time in Marcus Thompson's life. The building was old and gray, just like everything else in Millbrook. The hallways smelled of cheap cleaning products and teenage sweat. The students walked through those halls with empty eyes, already preparing themselves for lives of quiet struggle. Nobody talked about college. Nobody talked about leaving. It was like the whole town had agreed, without saying a word, that this was all there would ever be. Marcus tried to fit in at first. He really did. He joined the conversations about football and cars. He pretended to care about the things that other boys his age cared about. But his heart was never in it. His mind was always somewhere else. Always back home, sitting at his old piano, letting his fingers dance across the keys. The other students noticed. Teenagers have a sharp sense for people who are different. They can smell it, like sharks smell blood in the water. And Marcus was different. He was quiet when everyone else was loud. He was thoughtful when everyone else was careless. He looked at the world with eyes that saw things others could not see. The bullying got worse as the years went on. There was a boy named Derek Walker who seemed to take special pleasure in making Marcus's life miserable. Derek was the star of the football team. He was tall and strong and good-looking. All the girls wanted to date him. All the boys wanted to be him. And for some reason, he had decided that Marcus was his favorite target. "Hey, piano boy," Derek would shout across the cafeteria, making sure everyone could hear. "Play us a song. Maybe you can play at my wedding someday. That is about as close to success as you will ever get." The other students would laugh. Some of them felt bad about it. You could see it in their faces. But nobody stood up for Marcus. Nobody wanted to be on Derek's bad side. So they laughed along, and Marcus would sit there with his head down, feeling smaller and smaller with each passing day. One afternoon, things went too far. Marcus was walking home from school, taking the long way through the empty streets near the old factory. He liked this route because it was quiet. He could think about music. He could hear melodies in his head without being bothered. Derek and 3 of his friends appeared out of nowhere. They had been waiting for him. Their smiles were cruel, and their eyes were cold. Marcus felt his heart start to race. He looked around for somewhere to run, but there was nowhere to go. "Where do you think you are going, piano boy?" Derek asked, stepping closer. "We just want to talk. We just want to understand why you waste all your time on that stupid hobby of yours." Marcus tried to stay calm. His voice came out weaker than he wanted. "It is not a hobby. It is my passion. It is what I love." "Too." Derek laughed. It was an ugly sound. Passion? Love? Those are big words for someone who lives in a dump like Millbrook. Let me tell you something, Marcus. People like us do not get to have passions. People like us work in warehouses, and fix cars, and marry the first person who will have us. That is reality. The sooner you accept it, the better. Before Marcus could respond, Derek shoved him hard. Marcus fell backward, his back hitting the cold concrete. His books scattered across the ground. His sheet music, pages of songs he had been working on for months, flew into the air like wounded birds. The other boys laughed as they walked away, leaving Marcus alone on the ground. He lay there for a long time, staring up at the gray sky. Tears rolled down his cheeks, but he did not make a sound. He would not give them the satisfaction of hearing him cry. That night, Marcus did not eat dinner. He went straight to his room and closed the door. His mother knocked several times, asking if he was okay. He told her he was just tired. She did not believe him. But she did not push. Sometimes mothers know when their children need to be alone with their pain. For 3 days, Marcus did not touch the piano. It sat in the corner of the living room, silent and waiting. His parents exchanged worried looks, but said nothing. They had never seen him go so long without playing. On the 4th night, something changed. Marcus woke up at 2 in the morning. The house was quiet. Everyone was asleep. Moonlight came through his window, painting silver lines on his floor. And somewhere in the silence, he heard it. A melody. The most beautiful melody he had ever heard. It was playing in his head, demanding to be brought to life. He walked downstairs slowly, careful not to wake anyone. The piano was waiting for him in the darkness. He sat down and let his fingers rest on the keys. For a moment, he did nothing. He just felt the cool ivory beneath his fingertips. And then he began to play. The music that came out was unlike anything he had ever created before. It was sad and beautiful and powerful all at once. It was the sound of pain being transformed into something greater. It was the sound of a boy refusing to give up, even when the whole world told him he should. He played for 2 hours straight. When he finally stopped, his cheeks were wet with tears. But these were not tears of sadness. They were tears of release. Tears of understanding. He finally knew what he had to do. The next day, Marcus walked into school with his head held high. Derek was waiting by the lockers, ready with another insult. But this time, something was different. This time, Marcus looked him straight in the eyes. "You can say whatever you want," Marcus said quietly. "You can push me down as many times as you like, but you will never stop me from playing. Because music is not just something I do, it is who I am. And one day, while you are still stuck in this town, doing the same thing every day until you die, I will be somewhere else. Somewhere you cannot even imagine. And I will know that every laugh, every insult, every time you tried to break me, you were actually making me stronger." Derek stood there with his mouth open. He had no response. For the first time in his life, someone had stood up to him, not with fists, not with anger, but with something far more powerful, with certainty, with purpose, with unshakable belief. Marcus walked away without looking back. His heart was pounding in his chest. His hands were shaking. But he also felt something else. He felt free. The opinions of others no longer had power over him. The laughter could not hurt him anymore. He had found something inside himself that was stronger than any bully, any doubt, any cruel word. From that day forward, Marcus practiced harder than ever. He would wake up before dawn and play. He would come home from school and play until his fingers ached. He would stay up late into the night, perfecting every note, every chord, every subtle movement of his hands. His parents watched this transformation with wonder. The quiet, shy boy, who used to hide from the world, was becoming something else. He was becoming a young man, with fire in his eyes and music in his soul. They still worried about his future. They still had doubts. But they also began to believe, just a little bit, that maybe their son was special. Maybe he really could do the impossible. The years passed slowly in Millbrook. Seasons changed. People came and went. But Marcus remained constant. While his classmates were getting jobs and starting families and settling into ordinary lives, he was becoming extraordinary. And soon, the whole world would find out just how extraordinary he truly was. Marcus Thompson turned 18 on a cold November morning. There was no big celebration. His mother baked a small cake. His father gave him a card with $20 inside. They sat together at the kitchen table, eating cake and talking about nothing important. It was a simple birthday, just like all his birthdays before. But this birthday was different. Because on this day, Marcus made a decision that would change everything. He had been saving money for years. Every odd job he could find. Every lawn he mowed. Every car he washed. Every penny had gone into a jar hidden under his bed. And now, finally, he had enough. Enough to buy a bus ticket out of Millbrook. He did not tell his parents right away. He spent the next few weeks planning in secret. He researched cities with music scenes. He looked up open mic nights, and piano bars, and talent competitions. He made lists of places where he could play, where people might actually listen. The more he planned, the more real it became, the more possible. Finally, one evening after dinner, he sat his parents down in the living room. His mother knew immediately that something serious was coming. She always could read her son like a book. His father leaned back in his chair, arms crossed, waiting. "I am leaving Millbrook," Marcus said. His voice was steady, even though his heart was racing. "I am going to the city. I am going to find a way to make music my career." The silence that followed was heavy. His mother's eyes filled with tears. These were not the reactions Marcus had hoped for, but they were exactly the reactions he had expected. "You cannot be serious," his father said finally. His voice was tight with emotion. "You have no money. You have no connections. You do not even have a proper education in music. What are you going to do? Walk into some fancy concert hall and ask them to give you a chance? They will laugh you right out the door." Marcus nodded slowly. "Maybe they will. Maybe they will laugh at me just like everyone else has. But I have to try. I cannot spend my whole life wondering what might have happened. I cannot grow old in this town, always asking myself if I could have made it. Even if I fail, at least I will know that I tried." His mother wiped her eyes with the back of her hand. She took a deep breath and stood up from her chair. Then, she walked over to Marcus and wrapped her arms around him. She held him tight for a long time, not saying a word. When she finally let go, there were tears running down her cheeks. "We always knew this day would come," she said softly. "We tried to protect you from disappointment. We tried to keep your expectations low, so you would not be hurt. But maybe we were wrong. Maybe you need to go out there and see for yourself." His father stayed silent. He stared at the floor, his jaw clenched. But later that night, when Marcus was packing his small bag, his father came to his room. He stood in the doorway, looking older and more tired than Marcus had ever seen him. "I had dreams once too," his father said quietly. "Dreams of being something more than what I became. Life beat those dreams out of me. Responsibilities, bills, fear. I do not want that to happen to you. But I also know that if you do not go, you will hate yourself forever. So go." Go and chase this crazy dream of yours. But promise me one thing. 8. 8. Marcus looked at his father. Anything. Promise me that no matter what happens, you will not give up until you have given it everything you have. Not until you have left every last drop of yourself on that piano. If you are going to do this, do it all the way. No half measures, no regrets, Marcus promised. Father and son shook hands. It was the closest thing to a hug that his father had ever given him. The bus station was empty when Marcus arrived the next morning. Just a small building with a few plastic chairs and a tired-looking woman behind the counter. His parents stood with him, waiting for the bus to arrive. Nobody spoke. There was nothing left to say. When the bus finally pulled up, Marcus hugged his mother one last time. She pressed a small envelope into his hand. Inside was every dollar she had saved for emergencies. Marcus tried to give it back, but she refused. "You will need it more than we will," she said. "Now go. Go make us proud." The bus ride to the city took 6 hours. Marcus watched the landscape change through the dirty window. The small houses of Millbrook gave way to open fields. The fields gave way to suburbs. And the suburbs gave way to something Marcus had only seen in pictures. Tall buildings reaching up toward the sky. Streets filled with people walking in every direction. Lights and sounds and energy that made his head spin. This was it. This was where dreams either came true or died. He found a cheap room in a boarding house on the edge of downtown. The room was tiny. Just enough space for a single bed and a small desk. The walls were thin. He could hear everything his neighbors did. The bathroom was shared by everyone on the floor. But it was his first real step into independence. For the first few weeks, Marcus did nothing but walk the streets. He wanted to understand the city. He wanted to feel its rhythm. He visited every piano, bar, and jazz club he could find. He watched other musicians perform, studying their techniques, their stage presence, the way they connected with their audiences. He also saw how hard it was. The competition was fierce. There were hundreds of pianists in the city, all of them fighting for the same handful of spots. Many of them had studied at expensive music schools. Many of them had been playing since they were toddlers. They had teachers and mentors and connections. Marcus had none of these things. All he had was his talent and his determination. He started playing wherever he could. Street corners, subway stations. Anywhere there was a piano and someone willing to let him use it. He did not make much money. Some days, he barely made enough to eat. But he kept playing. Day after day. Week after week. Slowly, people started to notice. A few coins became a few dollars. A few people stopping to listen became small crowds. There was something about the way Marcus played that was different. Something raw and honest and deeply moving. His music came from a place of real emotion. It was the sound of struggle and hope all wrapped together. One evening, a woman in an expensive coat stopped to listen. She stood there for 20 minutes. Not moving. Not checking her phone. When Marcus finished playing, she walked over and handed him a business card. "My name is Victoria Chen," she said. "I manage a venue downtown. We are having an open talent night next month. I think you should come." Marcus looked at the card in his hand. His heart was beating so fast he could barely breathe. This was it. This was the opportunity he had been waiting for. The chance to prove himself in front of a real audience. The chance to show the world what he could do. He thanked her and promised he would be there. As he watched her walk away into the crowd, he felt something shift inside him. The journey was far from over. In many ways, it was just beginning. But for the first time since leaving Millbrook, he allowed himself to believe that maybe, just maybe, his dreams could come true. The month before the talent night passed in a blur of practice and preparation. Marcus barely slept. He barely ate. Every waking moment was spent at the piano, perfecting his performance. He had one shot at this. One chance to make an impression. He could not afford to waste it. He decided to play an original composition, something he had been working on for years. A piece called Silent Thunder. It was the most personal thing he had ever created. Every note was filled with his memories, the loneliness of growing up different, the pain of being mocked and misunderstood, the quiet strength that came from refusing to give up. If he could play this piece perfectly, he knew it would move people. He knew it would make them feel something real. But doubt was a constant companion during those weeks. Late at night, lying in his tiny room, he would stare at the ceiling and wonder if he was fooling himself. What if Victoria Chen had just been being nice? What if she gave her card to every street performer she met? What if he showed up at the talent night and made a complete fool of himself? These thoughts would circle in his head like hungry wolves. Sometimes they would keep him awake until morning. But every time the doubt became too strong, Marcus would get up and play. The music always brought him back. The music always reminded him why he was doing this. The venue was called the Blue Room. It was a small but famous club in the heart of downtown. Many great musicians had performed there before going on to bigger things. The walls were covered with photographs of legends, jazz pianists, soul singers, blues guitarists, people who had stood on that very stage and changed the world with their talent. Marcus visited the club 3 times before the big night, just to get a feel for the space. He would order the cheapest drink on the menu and sit in the corner, watching. He studied the way the lights fell on the stage. He listened to the acoustics. He noticed how the audience reacted to different types of performances. Knowledge was power. Preparation was everything. The night before the talent show, Marcus called his mother. It was late, and her voice was sleepy when she answered. But as soon as she heard it was him, she became fully awake. "How are you feeling, sweetheart?" she asked. Marcus was honest. Terrified. "I keep thinking about everything that could go wrong. What if I forget the notes? What if my hands freeze up? What if nobody cares?" His mother was quiet for a moment. Then, she spoke in that gentle, but firm way that only mothers can. "Do you remember when you were 7 years old? When you first found that old piano in Grandma's house? You did not know a single thing about playing. You had never had a lesson, but you sat down and you tried anyway. That little boy did not care about failure. He just loved the music. You need to find that little boy again. Play tomorrow, like nobody is watching. Play because you love it. The rest will take care of itself." Marcus smiled for the first time in days. His mother always knew exactly what to say. They talked for another hour. About home, about his father, about all the small things he missed. When he finally hung up, he felt calmer, more centered, ready. The day of the talent night arrived gray and rainy. Marcus took it as a sign. Not a bad sign, but a meaningful one. Rain had always been special to him. Some of his best compositions had come to him during storms. He spent the morning doing breathing exercises and light stretching. He ate a simple meal of bread and eggs. He dressed in the nicest clothes he owned, a black shirt and dark pants. Nothing fancy, but clean and presentable. He arrived at the Blue Room 2 hours early. The club was still quiet. Staff members setting up chairs and testing equipment. Victoria Chen spotted him immediately and walked over with a warm smile. "You came," she said. "Good. I was hoping you would not lose your nerve." Marcus shook her hand. "I almost did. Several times." Victoria laughed. Every great performer feels that way before a big show. The ones who succeed are the ones who feel the fear and do it anyway. You are going to be the 5th act tonight. That gives you some time to settle in and watch the others. The performers that night were impressive. A jazz trio with decades of experience. A young woman with a voice like honey. A guitarist who played so fast, his fingers were a blur. Marcus watched them all from backstage, feeling smaller and smaller with each performance. These people were real musicians, trained, polished, professional. Who was he to think he belonged among them? A hand touched his shoulder. He turned to find an older man standing behind him. The man had gray hair and kind eyes. He was wearing a worn-out jacket that had seen better days. "First time on a real stage?" the man asked. Marcus nodded. "That obvious?" The man smiled. "I have been playing piano for 40 years. Performed all over the world. And you know what? I still get nervous before every show. The trick is not to eliminate the fear. The trick is to let it fuel you. Use that energy. Channel it into your playing. The audience can feel authenticity. They can tell when someone is playing from the heart. That matters more than technique, more than training, more than anything." Before Marcus could respond, a stagehand called his name. It was time. His legs felt like they were made of lead as he walked toward the stage. The lights were blinding. He could not see the audience, but he could feel them. Dozens of eyes, all focused on him, waiting, judging. The piano sat in the center of the stage like an old friend. Marcus walked toward it slowly. He could hear whispers from the audience. He heard someone laugh. A quiet, mocking sound that reminded him of Derek Walker and all the bullies from his past. For a moment, he wanted to run, to flee back to his tiny room, and forget this whole thing had ever happened. But then he remembered his mother's words. Play like nobody is watching. Play because you love it. He sat down at the piano. He placed his fingers on the keys. He closed his eyes, and he began to play. The first notes of silent thunder filled the room, soft and delicate, like raindrops falling on a still lake. The whispers stopped. The laughter died. A hush fell over the entire club as the music washed over them. Marcus did not think about technique. He did not think about the audience. He thought about his grandmother's piano, about the first time he touched those yellowed keys, about all the nights he practiced alone while the world laughed at him, about his father's calloused hands and his mother's tired smile, about every cruel word and every broken dream and every moment of doubt he had ever faced. All of it poured out through his fingers. The music grew louder, more intense. It swelled like a storm gathering strength. Then it crashed down like thunder, shaking the walls of the little club. Then it softened again, gentle as a whisper, as a prayer, as a promise. When the final note faded into silence, Marcus opened his eyes. For a moment, nothing happened. The audience sat frozen, as if caught in a spell. Then, slowly at first, someone started to clap. Then another person. Then another. And suddenly the entire room was on its feet, applauding wildly, some of them with tears streaming down their faces. Marcus sat at the piano, unable to move, unable to believe what was happening. This was not like anything he had imagined. This was not polite appreciation. This was something deeper, something raw and real. These people had felt what he felt. They had heard what he was trying to say. They had understood. Victoria Chen was the first to reach him when he finally stood up. Her eyes were shining with emotion. "Where have you been hiding?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. That was one of the most beautiful things I have ever heard. Marcus did not know what to say. He just stood there, trembling, as the applause continued to rain down around him. The boy from Millbrook, the kid nobody believed in, he had walked onto that stage expecting to fail. And instead, he had stunned the entire room. The days following that magical night at the Blue Room changed Marcus Thompson's life in ways he never could have predicted. Word spread quickly through the city's music scene. People who had been there that night told their friends. Those friends told other friends. Soon, Marcus's name was being whispered in places he had never imagined. Recording studios, concert halls, music magazines. Everyone wanted to know about the unknown pianist, who had made an entire room cry with a single performance. Victoria Chen became his informal manager. She did not ask for a contract or a percentage. She simply believed in him and wanted to help. She introduced him to producers, club owners, and industry insiders. She got him more performance slots at the Blue Room and at other venues around the city. Within weeks, Marcus went from playing for spare change on street corners to performing in front of packed crowds every weekend. But success brought its own challenges. The life of a working musician was harder than Marcus had ever imagined. Late nights that stretched into early mornings, long hours of practice followed by longer hours of performing, the constant pressure to create new material, the endless networking, smiling at people he did not know, pretending to enjoy conversations about business when all he wanted to do was play. There were also people who wanted to take advantage of him. Men in expensive suits who showed up at his performances with contracts and promises. They spoke of record deals and world tours and millions of dollars, but Victoria warned him to be careful. This industry chews people up and spits them out, she told him during a late-night meeting at a coffee shop. They see your talent. They see your authenticity. And they want to package it, put it in a box, sell it to the masses. But the moment you let them control you, you lose the very thing that makes you special. Marcus listened carefully. He turned down offers that felt wrong. He walked away from deals that seemed too good to be true. It was not easy. Sometimes the money being offered was more than his parents made in a year. But something deep inside him refused to compromise. His music was not a product. It was his soul. And his soul was not for sale. Months passed. Marcus continued to grow, as an artist and as a person. He moved out of the cramped boarding house and into a small apartment with a proper piano. It was still tiny by city standards, but it felt like a palace compared to where he had come from. He called his parents every week, telling them about his performances, his new friends, the exciting world he was discovering. His mother cried happy tears during every call. His father, true to form, expressed his pride in quieter ways. He would ask detailed questions about the music industry. He would offer practical advice about saving money and avoiding debt. Once, during a rare moment of emotion, he told Marcus that he was proud of him. Marcus held on to those words like treasure, but even as his star was rising, Marcus never forgot where he came from. He returned to Millbrook for the first time, one cold December morning. The bus ride felt different this time. He was no longer running away from something. He was returning as someone who had achieved what everyone said was impossible. The town looked exactly the same. The empty streets, the closed factories, the gray buildings that seemed to absorb all light and hope. But Marcus saw it differently now. He saw the beauty in its simplicity, the strength in its struggle. This place had shaped him, for better and for worse. It was part of who he was. His parents threw a small dinner in his honor. Just family and a few old neighbors who remembered him as a quiet, strange child. Mrs. Patterson from across the street was there. So was old Mr. Jenkins from the hardware store. They all looked at Marcus with wonder in their eyes. The boy who used to sit alone at his grandmother's piano was now a real musician, a real artist, someone who had made it out of Millbrook and found success in the wider world. After dinner, Marcus sat at his old piano, the same instrument he had discovered as a 7-year-old boy. The same yellowed keys and worn hammers and slightly out-of-tune notes. He had not touched it in almost a year. But the moment his fingers made contact, everything came flooding back. He played for 2 hours while his parents and neighbors listened in silence. He played the songs he had written as a teenager, pouring his loneliness into melody. He played the new compositions that had made him famous, the ones that made audiences weep with their raw emotion. And he played Silent Thunder, the piece that had started it all, the music that had transformed him from a nobody into someone worth listening to. When he finally stopped, his mother was openly crying. His father had turned away, pretending to look out the window. But Marcus could see his shoulders shaking. Even the neighbors, People who had watched Marcus grow up without paying much attention seemed moved beyond words. "I always knew you were special," his mother said, wrapping him in a tight hug. "Even when you were little. Even when we tried to protect you from disappointment. There was always something in you that was meant for greater things." Marcus stayed in Millbrook for 3 days. He walked the streets he had walked as a child. He visited his grandmother's grave and told her about the piano she had left behind. He even ran into Derek Walker, who was now working at the same car repair shop where Marcus's father had spent his entire career. Derek looked older than his years. His face was tired. His eyes had lost their cruelty. When he saw Marcus, he seemed to shrink, as if waiting for payback for all those years of torment. But Marcus felt no anger, no desire for revenge. He simply nodded at Derek and walked on. The past was the past. He had already won the only victory that mattered. He had proven, beyond any doubt, that dreams could come true. The bus ride back to the city felt like traveling between worlds. Millbrook disappeared behind him, growing smaller and smaller until it vanished into the horizon. Ahead lay the sprawling lights of the city, bright and beckoning. Full of possibilities he was only beginning to explore. Marcus leaned his head against the window and closed his eyes. He thought about everything he had been through. The struggles, the doubts, the moments when giving up had seemed like the only option. But he had not given up. He had kept playing. He had kept believing. And now, finally, his belief was being rewarded. But he was also wise enough to know that the journey was far from over. Success was not a destination. It was a continuous process. There would be more challenges ahead, more obstacles, more people who would doubt him or try to hold him back. The music industry was brutal, and many artists burned bright for a moment before fading into obscurity. Marcus was determined not to be one of them. He would keep growing, keep learning, keep pushing himself to create music that mattered. Because at the end of the day, that was all that really counted. Not the fame, not the money, not the applause, just the music. The pure, honest, heartfelt music that had been inside him since the very beginning. As the city lights grew closer, Marcus smiled to himself. The boy from Millbrook had come a long way, but the best was still to come. 2 years after that first performance at the Blue Room, Marcus Thompson stood backstage at the Grand Metropolitan Theater. This was not some small club with 100 seats. This was one of the most famous concert halls in the entire country. 3,000 people had paid to see him perform. His face was on posters throughout the city. Music critics who had never heard of him 2 years ago were now writing long articles about his genius. The journey to this moment had been intense. After the Blue Room, there had been more performances, bigger venues, more attention from the press. A small record label run by a woman named Rebecca Torres had signed him. She was different from the other executives who had approached him. She did not want to change his style or polish away his rough edges. She simply wanted to record his music and share it with the world. His first album, titled Millbrook Memories, was released to critical acclaim. It debuted in the top 20 of the charts, an almost unheard-of achievement for a classical piano album in the modern age. Suddenly, Marcus was being interviewed on television shows. His face appeared in magazines. Strangers recognized him on the street and asked for photographs and autographs. The attention was overwhelming at first. Marcus had spent most of his life being invisible, being ignored, being overlooked. Now, suddenly, everyone wanted a piece of him. Fans sent him thousands of letters and messages. Some were touching, stories of people whose lives had been changed by his music. Others were strange or even frightening. The price of fame was a loss of privacy that Marcus was not prepared for. But he adapted. He learned to smile for cameras. He learned to give interviews without revealing too much of himself. He learned to separate Marcus, the person, from Marcus, the performer. It was a necessary skill. Without it, the constant attention would have driven him crazy. Through it all, he never stopped practicing. Every morning, before the world woke up, Marcus would sit at his piano and play. Not for an audience, not for fame, just for himself. Just to reconnect with the love of music that had started everything. These early morning sessions were sacred. They reminded him who he really was. Beneath all the success and celebrity, his second album was even more successful than the first. It reached number 3 on the charts and stayed there for 12 weeks. Concert tours followed. Europe, Asia, South America. Marcus played in cities he had only dreamed of visiting. Paris, Tokyo, London, Buenos Aires. Everywhere he went, sold-out crowds greeted him with standing ovations. But success came with loneliness. The life of a touring musician was isolating. Endless hotel rooms that all looked the same. Cities that blurred together after a while. Relationships that fell apart because he was never home. Marcus had dated a few women over the years, but none of them could handle the demands of his career. They wanted someone who would be there for dinners, and weekends, and holidays. Marcus was usually on stage somewhere, playing for strangers. Victoria Chen remained a constant presence in his life. She had officially become his manager after the first album's success. She traveled with him, handled the business side of things, and protected him from the vultures who circled the entertainment industry. She was the closest thing to a best friend that Marcus had. His parents came to visit him whenever they could afford to take time off work. Seeing them in fancy hotel suites or front row seats at his concerts filled Marcus with a complicated mix of emotions. Joy at being able to share his success with them. Guilt that they still lived in Millbrook, still working the same jobs they had always worked. Marcus offered to buy them a new house, a new car, anything they wanted. But they refused. "We are happy with what we have," his mother always said. "We are proud of you. That is enough for us." His father nodded in agreement. Though Marcus sometimes caught him staring at hotel lobbies or concert halls with wonder in his eyes. Robert Thompson had never left Millbrook in his entire life. Now his son was playing piano for royalty and celebrities. The world could be strange and beautiful sometimes. The night of the Grand Metropolitan Theater performance was the culmination of everything Marcus had worked for. This was not just another concert. This was a celebration, a tribute. The event was being broadcast live to millions of viewers around the world. Proceeds from ticket sales were going to music education programs in underprivileged communities. Marcus had insisted on this. He wanted to give other kids like himself a chance to discover their talents. Backstage, Victoria found him pacing nervously. Despite all his success, the fear never fully went away. Every performance still felt like a test. Every audience still held the power to accept or reject him. "Your parents are in the front row," Victoria said with a gentle smile. "Your mother has been crying since they sat down. Happy tears, I think." Marcus laughed despite his nerves. "She always cries. Even when I was practicing terrible songs as a kid, she would pretend to cry because she did not want to hurt my feelings." Victoria handed him a glass of water. "In 30 minutes, you are going to walk out there and show the world why you are one of the greatest pianists of our generation. Forget the cameras. Forget the critics. Play for your parents. Play for the kid you used to be. That is all you need to do." The theater was breathtaking. Golden chandeliers hung from the ceiling like frozen explosions of light. Red velvet seats stretched back into darkness. The stage was massive, dominated by a stunning grand piano that probably cost more than his parents' house. Marcus walked out to thunderous applause. The lights were blinding, just like at the Blue Room all those years ago. But this time, he was not scared. He was ready. He sat at the piano and looked out at the audience. Somewhere out there, his mother and father were watching. People from all over the world were watching through their screens. And in countless small towns and forgotten places, kids just like him were watching too. Kids who had been told their dreams were impossible. Kids who had been laughed at and mocked and dismissed. This performance was for them. Marcus placed his fingers on the keys and began to play. The music filled the grand hall, rising toward the painted ceiling, echoing off the ancient walls. It was the story of his life, translated into sound. Every struggle, every victory, every moment of doubt, and every moment of triumph. When he finished, the audience did not clap immediately. They sat in stunned silence, processing what they had just experienced. Then, like a wave building in the ocean, the applause began. It grew louder and louder until it became a roar. People stood from their seats. Some of them were crying. Some were shouting his name. Marcus stood and took a bow. He looked at his parents in the front row. His mother was sobbing openly. His father had tears running down his weathered cheeks. Even from a distance, Marcus could see the pride shining in their eyes. At that moment, Marcus Thompson understood something important. Success was not about fame or money or recognition. It was about staying true to yourself, about pursuing your passion even when the world told you it was worthless, about never giving up, no matter how hard things got. The boy from Millbrook had done all of these things. And now, standing on the greatest stage of his life, he knew that everything he had been through had been worth it. 10 years had passed since the Grand Metropolitan Theater performance. Marcus Thompson was now a name that needed no introduction. He had released 7 albums, each one exploring new dimensions of his art. He had won every major award in the music industry. He had performed for presidents and kings, at ceremonies and celebrations that would be remembered for generations. But the most meaningful work of his life had nothing to do with fame or awards. The Marcus Thompson Foundation was born 5 years after his breakthrough. It started small, with a single music school in Millbrook. Marcus had returned to his hometown with architects and builders, determined to give back to the place that had shaped him. Where there had once been an abandoned factory, there now stood a beautiful building filled with pianos and guitars and drums and every instrument a child could dream of playing. The school was free for every student. Children from Millbrook and the surrounding towns could walk in without $1 in their pocket and walk out with skills that could change their lives. Marcus hired the best teachers he could find. He visited whenever his schedule allowed, giving masterclasses and performances that inspired the students to reach for their own impossible dreams. One school became 2, then 5, then 20. The foundation spread across the country, then around the world. In cities and villages where music education had never existed, Marcus Thompson schools were giving young people opportunities they never thought possible. He met thousands of students over the years. Kids who reminded him of himself. Quiet, different, underestimated by everyone around them. He would sit with them after classes and tell them his story. The grandmother's piano, the bullies at school, the nights of doubt and fear. He wanted them to know that talent alone was not enough. You also needed perseverance. You needed belief in yourself. You needed the courage to keep going even when everyone told you to stop. Some of these students went on to become professional musicians. Others became teachers themselves, passing on what they had learned to new generations. A few became famous, their names appearing in headlines around the world. But Marcus was equally proud of the ones who found simpler paths. The child who learned piano and gained the confidence to pursue a career in medicine. The teenager who discovered drumming and overcame their social anxiety. Every life changed by music was a victory. Marcus's personal life also transformed during these years. He met a woman named Elena at one of his foundation events. She was a pediatric surgeon, completely uninterested in fame or celebrity. Their first conversation lasted 4 hours. By the end of it, Marcus knew he had met someone special. They married in a small ceremony in Millbrook. His parents were there, older now, but still full of love and pride. Victoria Chen served as his best woman, a role she accepted with her trademark dry humor. The wedding took place in the very building that had once been his grandmother's house, rebuilt and renovated but still holding the spirit of that dusty old piano in the corner. Elena understood Marcus in ways nobody else ever had. She supported his career without being consumed by it. She kept him grounded when success threatened to go to his head. She gave him a home to return to after long tours. And she gave him something he had never expected to have: children. Marcus became a father at 42. Twin daughters who had his mother's eyes and their mother's strength. He named them Hope and Grace, two qualities that had carried him through his darkest times. Watching them grow was the greatest joy of his life. He taught them piano, of course, but never pushed them. Music should be a gift, not a burden. If they wanted to pursue it, he would support them. If they wanted to become doctors, like their mother, or engineers, or artists, or anything else, he would support that too. His father passed away peacefully in his sleep one autumn morning. Marcus was at his bedside, holding his hand, playing soft melodies on a small keyboard he had brought to the hospital room. Robert Thompson's last words were barely a whisper. "I am proud of you, son. Always have been. Even when I was too scared to say it." Marcus played at his father's funeral. He played Silent Thunder, the piece that contained everything his father had taught him about quiet strength and determined persistence. There were no dry eyes in the small church in Millbrook. Even people who had not known Robert Thompson personally understood that they were witnessing something sacred, a son honoring his father through the only language he truly knew. His mother moved to the city after that. She wanted to be close to her grandchildren, to watch them grow and fill their heads with stories about their grandfather. She lived in a comfortable apartment that Marcus insisted on paying for. Every Sunday, the whole family gathered for dinner. These were Marcus's favorite moments, not the concerts, or the awards, or the standing ovations. Just a simple meal with the people he loved. At 50 years old, Marcus gave what would become his farewell tour. It was not that he was retiring from music. He would never fully retire from music. It was part of him, woven into his DNA. But he wanted to step back from the spotlight. He had proven everything he needed to prove. Now, it was time to focus on teaching, on the foundation, on his family. The final concert was held at the Blue Room, the same small club where everything had begun. Victoria had arranged it as a surprise. When Marcus walked onto that familiar stage and saw the intimate crowd before him, he was overwhelmed with emotion. This was where Victoria had first believed in him. This was where he had played Silent Thunder for the first time. This was where Marcus Thompson, the street performer, had transformed into Marcus Thompson the artist. He played for 3 hours that night. Every major piece from his career. New compositions he had never shared publicly. Improvisations that came from somewhere deep in his soul. The audience was small, but the impact was enormous. People who had followed his career for decades, young musicians who had grown up listening to his albums, even a few of his former students, now successful artists in their own right. When it was over, Marcus sat at the piano for a long moment, looking out at the faces before him. He thought about the journey that had brought him here. The 7-year-old boy who had found a dusty piano. The teenager who had been bullied and mocked. The young man who had left everything behind to chase an impossible dream. The artist who had stunned rooms and touched millions of hearts. He had done it. Despite everything, he had done it. Marcus Thompson stood and took one final bow. The applause washed over him like warm rain. But he barely heard it. He was thinking about his grandmother's piano, about his mother's encouraging words, about his father's calloused hands, about everyone who had believed in him when believing seemed foolish. As he walked off stage for the last time, Marcus smiled. The music would never stop. It would live on in his students, his albums, his children. It would continue to inspire people long after he was gone. The boy from Millbrook had proven something important, something that would resonate through generations. Dreams were not foolish. Passion was not weakness. And talent, combined with determination and courage, could overcome any obstacle. They had all laughed at him once. Now, the whole world was listening.